Hey there, listeners. This is Justin with a quick note before today's episode. Audible.com is offering Beyond the Uniform listeners one free audiobook. You can see this offer, as well as a list of every book guests have recommended on the show, at beyondtheuniform.io/books. That's beyondtheuniform.io/books. Thanks and enjoy the show. Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Asiri, and each week I interview military veterans about their civilian career. Today's episode number 63 with Todd Ehrlich.
I'll never forget, my fiance at the time and it was like a holiday, and we were going to visit some relatives somewhere, and I pulled the car over. I said, hey, I'm about to spend a bunch of money on this idea to start this drink called Kill Cliff, and I might not get anything out of it, but at least I can say, I did it and I tried and everything else. And she was like, you're gonna be great. You'll be awesome at that, And I was like, really? You think so? And she was like, yeah, sure. She's like, you'll make more money if we lose the money or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. So having her support me at that moment in time was incredibly valuable. And I just kind of moved forward with it.
The top two reasons to listen to today's episode are, number one, serial entrepreneur. Todd has started multiple successful startups, each in different industries. There's the recovery drink, Kill Cliff, ranked as the 301st fastest growing company in the US, and the real estate appraisal company, TriServe, and more. He talks about the passion of true entrepreneurs, and it comes through in each of his stories and all of his advice. Number two, self-knowledge. I really admire Todd's ability to recognize his strengths and what he enjoys. His Navy SEAL background comes through as he talks about how his sweet spot is the first 1,000 days of a company, dropping in to develop a new idea, pivot in the uncertain circumstances as the idea grows, establishing the right people to keep the momentum going, and then moving on to the next idea. Whether you're interested in entrepreneurship or not, it's a shot of adrenaline listening to the stories from his background. As always, at beyondtheuniform.io, you can sign up for our newsletter, listen to other episodes, see a directory of resources for veterans, and see the show notes for today's episode, where you'll find links to all the books and resources Todd recommends. And with that, let's dive in to my interview with Todd Ehrlich. Well, joining me today in Atlanta is Todd Ehrlich. Todd, welcome to Beyond the Uniform.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
So quick background on Todd. He's the founder of Kill Cliff, which is the maker of the recovery drink with the same name. They've got about 40 employees and make continuous donations to the Navy SEAL Foundation. Todd also serves as the CEO at BAM Worldwide, the leading provider of cash management technology for small to medium transportation companies. He's also the founder and chairman of TriServe Appraisal Management Solutions, a real estate appraisal management company. Todd started out in the Navy, where he served as a SEAL for 4 years. After his transition from the military, he held a variety of positions at Kroll Associates, United Rentals, and Jacobs Private Equity. So Todd, I always think it helps to start off by learning about, at what point you decided to leave the Navy and how you approached that decision.
Well, I unlike most guys in the SEAL teams, I had at the time, I don't know what it's like today, but at the time, I only had a 4-year enlistment, and most guys had 6-year enlistments. And the reason why I only had a 4-year enlistment was I actually read all the information about what it took to get kind of go through SEAL training and all that, and realized you didn't have to sign up for 6 years. So I just signed up for 4. And I was coming to the end of my enlistment, and I was in a SEAL platoon, and at the time in the mid 90s, there wasn't a ton going on. And I just wasn't really, guys were coming back from deployments, not, inspired or, feeling like they had changed the world in any way. So I wasn't really excited about staying in a lot longer. And then, then there was kind of the economics of it too. I didn't feel like I was enlisted. I enlisted in the Navy. I think I got in as an E2 and got out as an E5. So I didn't feel like the I guess what I would call the economics were awesome, relatively speaking. And even though the signing or the reenlistment bonuses were like $20,000, and they got taxed pretty heavily, and it seemed like it came out to $4,000 or $3,000 a year, which didn't seem like a huge amount. So for whatever reason, I just decided to move on. And then I did 3 years in the reserves too, which was not awesome either. But I don't know. SEALs are usually a little bit more spirited, and I certainly was. So the military kind of structure was always a little bit stifling for me. So just decided to move on. I figured I could get out there, finish my degree, and kind of see what the world offered.
And at what point did you decide to start Killcliff? Did you always think I'm going to start my own company? And I'm just always curious to see how an idea becomes a reality for someone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of always had this idea of what I would call a anti-inflammatory recovery drink bouncing around the back of my head. And I had wanted to start some other companies, and actually it kind of attempted one when I was working in for kind of a guy who was like my mentor at United Rentals, but I just didn't have the time to put into it or the focus, to be honest. And basically, I think we all sit there with these, business ideas bouncing around our head, and then there's this, grit factor that comes into play, and I just got fed up with myself for, letting time go by and letting, like basically a lack of confidence, or a lack, or the inability to stifle the negative inner voice from letting me go forward. So I finally kind of overcame that, and had just been puttering around with the whole drink concept. And when I, eventually kind of, I'll never forget, like my fiance at the time and I were, it was like a holiday, and we were going to visit some relatives somewhere, and I pulled the car over before we got right up to this, as we're getting on like one of the roads up to the house. And I said, hey, I'm about to spend a bunch of money on this idea to start this drink called Killcliff, and I might not get anything out of it, but at least I can say, I did it and I tried and everything else. And she was like, you're gonna be great, you'll be awesome at that, and I was like, really, you think so? And she was like, yeah, sure. She's like, you'll make more money if we lose the money or whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. So like having her support me at that moment in time was like incredibly valuable, and I just kind of moved forward with it.
Oh man, that's so awesome, dude. It's so great to have someone like that in your corner, because there's, my experience, and I'm imagining most entrepreneurs and yours as well, is there's so much negativity to overcome inside and outside that if someone's close to you and they're not supportive, it can be such a killer. But to have someone like that in your corner cheering you on is just so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, other people's negative voices are almost completely worthless. But the power of a positive voice kind of goes incredibly long way. I like in my past, I can kind of, look at almost all the negative interaction I've had with, people close to me about the things I remember, one of my very close relatives telling me I'd never make it through SEAL training, and like, just thinking about it and going, God, that's, he's probably right, but like, that's a pretty rough thing to say, I'm just not wired like that, right? So I don't think, like, people are like, hey, I'm gonna go do this like crazy tough thing, and I'm like, that's awesome, and maybe I'm just gullible or naive, but I just have like this optimistic outlook, and I think over time, my choice of a wife and everything, kind of like I ended up finding someone who had we were different in a lot of ways, but we're very similar, kind of optimistically about what we could do. So.
And one of the things I was curious with, because you've had this history of entrepreneurship now, I'm just wondering, as you look back, would you have started Killcliff right out of the military, or was there certain things that you learned at Cross and United Rentals and Jacobs Private Equity that helped prepare you to start your company?
So that's something I ask myself a lot, right? And the battle I always have is the procrastination and learning along the route. So I knew nothing about starting a beverage company when I started Killcliff. I know substantially more now, but like still in the grand scheme of beverage, I know very little. With that being said, I did learn a lot working for my boss at United Rentals and at Jacobs Private Equity about business, a lot about business. And that definitely helped me. And where it really helped me was in the way things got structured, kind of how I funded the company, how I raised money and everything else. But what I would say is I probably could have accomplished that as well. And the one thing I would, if I could do it all over again with everything, I would have probably started everything sooner. I would have tried to be full blown on my own. And I had a foray in entrepreneurship before Killcliff, but I was building a company for basically one main investor. So, and I was successful at it, but like I was building someone else's dream, right? So, so I guess the point is, I think the knowledge that you gain by starting and getting going and everything is a better value than waiting to get more knowledge. But one thing that I did do is while I was doing other things, like full-time jobs, if you will, I was starting this stuff on the side. So it's not like I just had a clean break one day and like came up with Killcliff. I was doing like, lunch investor meetings to raise money for Killcliff while I was running another company that I had started. So, some people find that to be a bit of a conflict, but I really it didn't really conflict with work at all. So I kind of got the ball rolling and got enough steam going before, launching headlong into it. And I've done that, with Trident Services, the appraisal management company. That was something I started before Killcliff. It was an idea. I had some money. I came up with what I thought was a more sophisticated business model for that space. Found a couple guys to put on a team and let them go to work on it and build it up. And we built it into an incredible company that's crushing it today. So I did that on the side, so that those types of things, kind of like solving the problem, or, if anything, it puts your mind to work on those things, and there's a value in that. So you don't have to like completely jump ship, like from one boat into another. And sometimes I see people that do that. They're just looking for a job. Sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes guys are just looking for jobs when they're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and start a company. I'm like, you're not really an entrepreneur. Like, you're not passionate about starting this business. You're doing it because it's going to pay you a paycheck. And, I guess I probably have a lot of thoughts on that, but we can talk about that if you want. But yeah. I've seen that a lot, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm interested in your perspective on that too, because you've started, different companies that are successful but very different. Like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of overlap with Killcliff and then TriServe, but both are doing well. And I'm just wondering, more of your thoughts on that, of that passion versus, and I agree, it seems like there's a lot of entrepreneurship now that's just about looking for money rather than like looking to create something and looking to build something new and grow something.
Yeah, there was an article in the Harvard Business Review by, I think his name's John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins, about missionaries versus, mercenaries. And, the truth be told, I think I fall into the missionary category where I'm just doing stuff I love to do. I'm a, technically, a nerd about this stuff. I nerd out on it. And, that's, that's the difference, right? Like, this isn't just a job to me. This is like, I've now chosen like the rest of my life, I will be an entrepreneur. And the way I say it for me personally is I'm really good at the first 1,000 days or 2,000 days of a business, like kind of the whole concept to, getting the cash flow going. I can figure out, everything that needs to happen and deal with the pivots that you have to make along the way sometimes. I heard about it, another entrepreneur, kind of a friend of mine I know, and he just picked up his family and moved to Silicon Valley and all that stuff. And my buddy, who's closer friends with him, was telling me, that they, were now kind of competing against another company that I knew pretty well. And I was like, that's funny, because when he called me looking for business, he wasn't doing that. And I was like, did he pivot to that? And he was like, oh yeah, he's made like 3 pivots, but he's he is making it through each of those pivots and kind of getting to the next level and making it work and raising tons of money and all that stuff. And I guess the point is, that's an entrepreneur. That dude is pivoting until he gets that business positioned properly to like explode in a good way. So he's a real entrepreneur. Like, he's not just doing it for the job. And so many guys, they'll just be like, oh well. And you hear this, there's like a certain category of investors that fall into this category too, where they're like, oh well, your idea, your plan wasn't perfect, so screw you, I'm not interested or whatever. And you're just like, no, we didn't expect it to be perfect. We're making assumptions based on what we thought the market was, and the market wasn't what we thought it was, and all these other things changed. And so therefore, we changed our assumptions and reattacked and refaced the market, and now it's working, right? So that's an entrepreneur that just kind of has that grit, that just doesn't give up.
Oh, I love that. And one of the things I was curious about, like, what does your life look right now? You've got a couple different companies, a couple different roles. What does your typical day look like? Are you kind of dancing between different obligations, or how do you structure your day?
No, I spend so my full time, life is BAM. That's my full time job. I'm very focused on it. With Killcliff, I'm involved with the CEO, helping him, build the company and raise capital, all that stuff. I wouldn't say actually build the company, more like being a good sounding board for him. I'm on the board of directors there, and I interact with a few of the board members. With the other company, TriServe, I'm pretty close to the CEO. I talk to him a couple times a week. I'm the chairman, but that company runs like a well-oiled machine, because it's when you get in these companies that are super system driven and not like big shops of people, it's more system. They kind of run like machines at that stage. It's just like, hey, we need to add another person when we get to this level of revenue, and when we finish this project, we won't need that many more people. So it's just kind of a that business runs really smoothly. So I'm very focused on BAM. I recently hired another vet who I mentioned to you earlier. He's a Naval Academy guy, NFO, F-18 pilot, or NFO, and worked at McKinsey, went to HBS, all that stuff, and he's a real, like, without trying to sound funny, he's a great wingman. So him coming on board has really helped me tremendously kind of get out of the what I would call the day-to-day battling on the business, and be able to be more strategic and more like a CEO should be. Just figuring out ways to improve and increase equity value creation. So bringing that guy on board has been huge. So actually at this point in my life, with 3 kids and 3 little ones, I'm in a better place than I've ever been. When Killcliff and BAM were both kind of coming out of the ground, I had, and this is one of those things where I do this thing where I teach some doctors some business skills for another company, just as a side thing. It's kind of fun for me to do. But when people make excuses about entrepreneurship and business and all that, I kind of bring this example up from my own life that'll kind of put everything, that'll frame everything, for anybody listening. Killcliff was starting, BAM was starting. I quit my job as the CEO of the company I was running. I had a 3-month-old son, and basically no income, and kind of got everything going. In that process, I had a business partner who was supposed to run one company and I was supposed to run the other. And then he decided entrepreneurship wasn't really going to be his deal at that point in his life, and he moved on. And he's a great guy. It's like it's like SEAL training, right? Like, it's not for everyone. And I never, like, when guys would quit, I'd be like, dude, it's cool, man. Like, don't be ashamed of that. Like, you gave it your best shot, and it's just not for everybody, right? So entrepreneurship is kind of like that sometimes. It's kind of like people like the comfort of knowing they got a paycheck and a boss that they can, brown nose and everything else, right? So so basically in that situation, these companies were cruising along, and then we had a second child, and 18 months later, and I'm still struggling in the throes of all this stuff, and then like in the middle of the night one night, a giant 90,000 pound tree crashed down on my house, almost killed me and my wife. So we were homeless, and we had 2 babies and no house, and so and I had 2 baby companies too, right? So somehow through all that, made it work, built a new house, had a 3rd baby. Killcliff was, Inc. 500 number 103 fastest growing company in America. BAM was growing. My other company was growing. So I guess the point of all that diatribe there, Justin, is that there is no excuse for anything. If I showed you a picture of what my bedroom looked like after that tree fell on it, you would have thought a bomb went off. So the point being, there's no excuse for not finding a way to make it, and that's kind of what separates entrepreneurs from guys that just want like cool jobs.
I love it, man. I love so much what you're saying, and I also really admire your self-knowledge and saying, like, I'm the guy for the first 1,000 days, and then you're able to bring someone on and kind of continue the company. And I just feel like there's a lot of people who cling on to that position as CEO, even though that's not what they enjoy or what they're, what they want to do. And so I think it takes a lot of discipline and self-knowledge to say, like, I'm going to start this and then get it going, and then I'm going to go on to the next thing. And it seems like you've really found your stride and your sweet spot with that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what I should do, and I should find other leaders to follow behind me. I think, sure, could I run a company, after that period of time and build it up into the hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue? Of course, I think I can. I don't think that's what I'm best at, though, and I don't think I have the patience for that either. So I'm really good at that. Like, hey, this is like the next 24 months is going to be a struggle. It's going to be really hard. It's going to suck for a while, but we're going to build this from scratch, and it's going to be awesome. And let's build a team to do it. Like, I know that's what I'm good at, so I should do that. It's hard though. It's a challenging position to be in, because you're kind of always in this state of, okay, I think we're going to make it. But, based on everything sitting in front of me, that would tell me we're not going to make it, but somehow we're going to find a way to make it, right? And that's a tough place to be, kind of perennially. But, one way or another, kind of figure out a way to make it. So
I love it. It just seems like, obviously from an external view of special forces, it seems like the parallels are so strong, where you kind of go in, you get the job done, and then you get out. And it's just, it's kind of crazy to see that parallel in the civilian world of like getting in there, pivoting, operating in this unknown environment, and then extracting out of it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. Just recently with my company, we got invited to be at the one of the premier industry associations in our space, and to be like one of the top 20 kind of, not thought leaders, but, kind of along those lines in the space. And so they invited me to this meeting, and I went to the meeting, and we're the youngest company in the space by 10 years, right? Like, there was there was a lot of guys and gals who had known each other for a very long time at this meeting. And I knew a few, but like really, had very little history with everybody. And it was cool and it was neat and everything, but like, that's not the room I really belong in long term, right? So, and I know it, right? I'm like, we're across the street from the Atlanta Tech Village, and I love like entrepreneurs, right? Like, these guys are out there just like scrappy, making stuff happen, changing the game for everybody. And not all of them are going to make it, but like I feel like the good ones do, and they figure out they're good entrepreneurs, and they just keep doing it, right? Because there is kind of a special formula to it. And I I really respect those people. It's fascinating. And listen, this is grit based stuff, right? It's like completely based on, your level to, adapt and, be self-aware and deal with like what's going on and kind of push everybody and not really show everybody how scared you are and everything. It is kind of the difference between, success and failure, more or less, right?
I love it. And if someone's listening right now, let's say that they're on active duty and they wanna start their own company, what advice would you have for them? Either on, well, I guess, yeah. What advice would you have for them about starting their own company?
Well, I mean, so I heard a story recently directly from the guy who he was kind of on active duty at the time, deployed, and his wife was a nurse, and there was a business model around her, her profession that he came up with and was able to start it and build it. So I guess for me, I think the conceptualization and the ideation of whatever your business model is great if you just start writing it down. And then when you have like it doesn't have to be a business plan. People get all into their business plans and that's great. And I've seen a few, but like they're never really I think the Airbnb business plan was like an 8-slide deck that kind of like tells you what you need to know there. So I think people can get hung up in that, but once you kind of have a conceptual idea of what you want to do and how you want to do it, then I think you got to set some goals, and you don't have to hit every goal directly on point, but on target. But you should figure out like kind of like, hey, what am I really trying to accomplish here? And keep in mind that people always overestimate their ability to perform. I think there's actually a behavioral science experiment that was done that basically showed us that people overestimate their abilities by about 30% across the board. So I know I've done it. Other people do it. I see other people do it all the time. So just try to handicap yourself and say, hey, I think I can do X, Y, and Z, but let's just assume I can only do half, right? Then that'll help because there's always other things, and you always kind of add more to the equation as you move along, and it's always more complex and takes twice as long and everything else. So I guess start with a decent plan or idea, write it down, set some goals, and then kind of don't be in a rush. Like kind of be willing to take your time to do it. I think, for instance, everything I've done has always taken more time than I thought. So if you're patient, you can get there, but have some ideas, and then also, don't be afraid to pivot. Sometimes pivoting is the right thing to do. So you might have a great idea and be going down one route and then come up with another. Like look at the guys from ID Me. They came out with this. It was basically Groupon for military, and they came to me and said, hey, we'd love you to put a kill cliff deal on our deal. I forget, I think it was called Troop Swap or something like that. And I was like, what I really need is I really need a way to know that people that are coming to my website are actually military, so I can give them a military discount, because there's a lot of people that say they're military that aren't, and I don't want to give those losers discounts. I want to give real discounts to real military people. And I wasn't the only person having that problem, and they came up with ID Me. So it's that kind of thing. They had a huge pivot, and it looks like it worked, right? So don't be afraid to do that.
That's great. Well, I know that we're running out of time. I always like to leave the last question just open-ended, which is knowing that you have an audience of veterans and active duty military personnel. Anything else you'd want to say? It could be about personal life or professional life, but what other last pieces of advice would you want to pass on?
Yeah, I guess I would go back to my own history, kind of transitioning from the military to civilian life. The big takeaway for me is people aren't like you. The average person walking the earth out there, there's a reason why they didn't join the military. There's a reason why you did. So it took me a while to figure that out. And then once I figured it out, it was a little bit depressing, where I was kind of like, wow, people are crap. You know what I mean? Like, and that's really tough, you know, when you're like, wow, people aren't honest, and that guy just lied for no reason, you know, and you're just kind of like, I don't get it, right? So I think that for me personally, that was one of the most challenging things to deal with. And I look back, my military friends are, you know, still most of my best friends that I have, and they're, you know, great people and great guys. I guess the point is, it's really hard to adjust to that, but then on top of it, you know, you have all these benefits, you know, like you're, you know, if like I gotta catch a flight today. If I miss the flight, I'm not gonna get in any kind of trouble for that. You know what I mean? Like, so you know, I'm not like, there's all these things that are just not, you know, red zones anymore, where, you know, you can't get in trouble for it. Like, if I tell somebody some secret information about my business, you know, I'm not going to get put in Leavenworth for that. So, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of pros and cons, but it can be a little disappointing when you're interacting with people and they're like, oh yeah, blah, 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 this is great. And you're like, that guy's a complete liar, you know? So that's part of it. I think the other thing I would say is you got to be really careful of, like, of those people out there, you know, what, you know, kind of who you're dealing with. You got to be careful and start, like, really, if I could have done it earlier in my career, I would have, like, started kind of categorizing people and, like, taking real careful notes on who people were and what their character was and everything else. You know, and if I'm a big reader. I dropped out of college to join the Navy, and tried to go back, but the kids at the school I went to were just so ridiculous. I couldn't take it. So I guess I read a lot, and I've got some book recommendations if you want them.
Yeah, I would love them. Yeah.
Yeah, so one is Mindset by a woman named Carol Dweck. It basically talks about how, you know, people can have growth mindsets or kind of a fixed mindset. It's a really powerful book. It's even got a couple lines in there on leadership. I find it to be incredibly valuable. I recommend it to all the doctors that I teach in that course. And then another one is called Grit by Angela Duckworth, which just kind of explains a lot. I see it a lot in entrepreneurship, this kind of grit aspect. You know, strongly recommend that. So I think, you know, kind of understanding, you know, like, people's mindsets and kind of what makes one person succeed and another one fail is a value. And, you know, going into this, knowing that stuff, like, I didn't read those before I left the military, but going into this stuff, knowing those things can definitely help. And then this is going to sound like a, you know, kind of a crazy one, but it could help kind of bypass or you know, kind of miss some bad opportunities. There's a book called The Sociopath Next Door that talks about just kind of how common, you know, people with this, you know, kind of these sociopathic tendencies are. That was the thing, like, that really got me out there in the business world. Was I kept running into people that were not good people, and I just didn't understand it. And what you got to figure out is there's, you know, there really are, you know, people out there that just, their values aren't your values and everything else. And so that book helped me understand, like, hey, people fall into different categories. I need to be aware of that, like, it's not like my, you know, buddies from my, you know, SEAL training class who are all great guys, right? There's some real scum out there. So, and sometimes those guys are disguised as great people. You know, they got the right education, they got the right this, they got the right that, but they're really not out there to help you. And I know that sounds like a pretty cynical way to look at things, but it's the truth, and you see them in every organization. And you know, the best thing you can do as an entrepreneur is keep those people out of your organization. I call it, you know, the no douchebag rule. But, you know, the truth is you really gotta work hard to do it. And sometimes, you know, if you recognize it, that's great, but sometimes you got to go to another, kind of a umpire, if you will, to make the call for you. So, and you can do that there's professional resources that you can hire to do that. But that's in my experience, the biggest mistakes I've made are about hiring people and letting somebody slip by that I shouldn't have. In fact, I can think of four major glaring, hiring errors I made around that personality type, where, they're very charming and they sell you on how great they are and everything else, and then they get into your organization and just wreak havoc. So, I read that book and just have a knowledge of that's the biggest real issue you have, is somebody just screwing your business up because they're just not playing the game the same way everybody else is. And when I say game, they are keeping track based on something else. It's not dollars that they make. It's not, building relationships. It's, how many people can they hurt? And that's really kind of how some of these people operate. I know that's kind of a depressing way to end a conversation, but it's true.
Oh, no, I think this is great, man. I think that, personally, I've benefited from a lot of your advice. And for listeners on the show notes, I'll put links to all of those books. But it's super valuable just to hear the stories of how you've gone about this. And the energy just comes through, man. It's so energizing hearing you talk about this, because it's so clear that you're passionate and that you care about what you're building and you care about the people you work with. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I know between 3 kids and 3 businesses, it's got to be pretty crazy, but I know this will help a lot of veterans.
I hope it does, and feel free to come back to me with anything else.
Surface.
Thanks for listening. As we wrap up, I wanted to share 3 quick but important announcements. First of all, if you haven't already, please sign up for my newsletter at beyondtheuniform.io. Although I publish on LinkedIn and Facebook, I'll be starting to use the newsletter as my primary means to share new articles, episodes, and resources relevant to the veteran community. Second, I would love to hear from you. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a relationship where I do all of the talking. You can view me as your very own dedicated resource to help you and other veterans in your civilian career. Have feedback on what I can do differently? Let me know. Someone in particular you want me to track down for an interview? I'm all ears. Know of another way that I could help the veteran community? I'm dying to know. You can find me on LinkedIn, comment on any post at beyondtheuniform.io, email me at justin@beyondtheuniform.io, or if you're in the intel industry, I'm sure you can track me down in some super creepy way. However you do it, take me up on it. I thrive on feedback. Lastly, a quick plug for a few resources I think would benefit any veteran. American Corporate Partners and Service to School both provide free assistance to any veteran. American Corporate Partners pairs you with a mentor in your desired industry, and Service to Schools finds a mentor at a suitable undergrad or graduate school program to help you with your application. Check them out. As always, tons of great content and resources available at beyondtheuniform.io. I'm Justin Nassiri, and I'll be back soon with more great episodes.